Assalamu alaykum, everyone. This is the All Facts podcast here. I'm your host, Haris Vikar, and this is another episode on the Ramadan Insights, where a couple friends and I, we just talk about the benefits of Ramadan, and one guy just left. Okay, he's probably going to come back. Now he's back. Okay, now he's back. A couple of friends and I would just like to discuss the lesson we learned from Ramadan, and we hope to really share our insights with you. So, Afan was on last week's episode, and the other guy just left again. So you know more about him, but we have two new guests today, Zohair and Omar. Zohair, since Omar left and he may be coming back, but you're here, care to introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Zohair Pervez. I'm a second year at the University of Guelph in Biomedical Sciences, and like you all, we're all in it together, fasting. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So I'm ready when you guys are. We can get right into it.
This guy is straight up doing a resume. I'm second year biomedical sciences.
Well, bro, like, what kind of introduction you want me to give? Like, there's.
I thought it was just I'm Haris's friend.
Yeah, I live in Saga. Like,
this guy. Okay, now he's putting his address right.
Yeah, like, you want me to dox myself too? Like, I can if you need me to.
Oh, subhanallah. Okay, so last week we went over more about the benefits of Ramadan, the miracle of Ramadan, how Ramadan overall was just at the University of Guelph. We also touched upon the community and how fasting really was when we were younger compared to now. This episode we kind of Alhamdulillah, but also sadly we are in the first 10 days are completely done, which when you think about it, time really flies, right? And one thing I really wanted to really just touch on is, for this Ramadan specifically, what have you guys really done that has changed, or what was something you implemented this Ramadan you never did anything else? What was different about for at least for the first 10 days that was you tried to do something this Ramadan but it wasn't for previous ones? Anyone can take the table.
So you want to go? Or
Yeah, sure. Why not? So to be honest, the thing about these Ramadans, like now compared to the ones in the past, have been like there's been so much change in how we're able to give our attention towards Ramadan, how we have to like distribute our time in a more careful manner in order to like make sure that Ramadan is also there, but then also all of like the worldly matters in some sense, like of school, of work, and of family life, home life, community life. All these things are being carried along with Ramadan as well. So for me, the main thing that I've sort of started doing since last Ramadan was that I've, instead of going to Taraweeh, what I've been doing is I actually go for Tahajjud at 2 a.m. So I've sort of switched up the schedule in a way, so now I have more time after iftar, where I can sort of take a little bit of time, unwind, study, like do all that stuff, and then at like take a little nap, and then around 2 I get up and I head on down to Isna to do the little like the tahajjud session that they have from it's like 2:30 to 4:30, like 2 hours of like 8 rak'ah, and then after that it's just suhoor. So that's what I've sort of incorporated into my life since then.
Wait, what's the sleep schedule looking like? So this guy never sleeps.
So it's like I'll try to go to sleep by like 11, so like 10ish, 11ish. So technically it's past my bedtime, but for today it's okay. So what I've been doing is I'll go to sleep around 10, 11, and then I'll wake up around 2. And then tahajjud, suhoor. I'll be at home, and then around 6:30 now, I'll go back to sleep and wake up at 8:30 to drive to like back to Guelph for class, and also pick up a fan on the way too. So that's what's been happening for the past like what 7 days now. That's been my routine.
Oh wait, Omar came in. Omar, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, so we were just going through the beginning of talking about why we're doing these episodes and what not. Omar, care to introduce yourself? Zohair introduce himself, Han introduce himself. You're also a guy in this podcast right now, so care to introduce yourself.
And tell us why you're in a car as well.
funny. I didn't know
Where you're
we actually
driving,
did
yo,
that. Yeah.
why you're driving there, yeah, everything. Where you coming from?
Okay, no, 100%. So I'm actually just coming back from uni right now. I just dropped off my friend. You know what I'm saying? But my name's Omar Asif. Um, I'm a third year business student at the University of Guelph. Uh, I'm also the Dawah director of the MSA at the university. Uh, I was born in Toronto, and then I moved to Milton, which is where I live right now, back in 2014. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like a Milton goon basically right now. Uh, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much that's pretty much all I can say
Because
about
that's like
me
it's a
in an
threat.
introduction.
Okay, so subhanallah. Okay, so business student, one of the few ones actually for at least in the Muslim community in Guelph. I'm also one of them too. We like to make this joke around campus that Omar and I are the only students there, and then we're the only ones in the class because everyone else is doing something similar. Alhamdulillah, we each have
Alhamdulillah.
our own specialties to work on. But Omar, so we were just going around. What is something this Ramadan you kind of do or doing differently, or what's something you've been hoping to do in this Ramadan that makes this Ramadan different compared to the other ones in the past?
Um, that's a good question. Wallahi, that's a very good question. I want to say the voluntary prayers and the voluntary acts, because last Ramadan, like of course your fard is the first priority, 100%. But on top of that, what are you doing? To better yourself, essentially. Like it's like some guy walks up to you and he gives you $100, and he walks up to you again and says, "Hey, I'll give you another $100 if you just do this thing for me." But you say no because you're feeling lazy or whatever it is, right? So anybody in their logical thinking would be like, "How'd you just deny $100 like that?" You know. But in this case, the voluntary prayers, etc., and all these voluntary acts that you put upon the fard, etc., is what gives you that $100, which is the akhirah in this case, if that makes sense. So that's basically what I'm trying to focus on. One of the things I'm trying to focus on this Ramadan is any voluntary act, any sunnah, any nawafil, etc., anything that I can to put my effort in as hard as I can, etc.
That's a really good point, especially since I think for all of us in Ramadan, that's
100%.
when we kind of feel at least motivated that we want to do more voluntary acts, especially more acts to please Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and especially in Ramadan, the deeds will be multiplied, and then we hope to carry these habits, sort of, to transfer to really implement outside of Ramadan as well, which actually is one of the things I was actually going to say is that what I kind of focused on this Ramadan was really more so that instead of just thinking, okay, this is Ramadan, I'll try to make the most out of the opportunity, which Alhamdulillah, anyone can really do that. But at the same time, how I wanted to approach this month was thinking, okay, the way how I live each day in Ramadan is kind of how I want my daily life to be. I want to, let's say you wake up and you read more Quran in the morning. I kind of want to implement that in Ramadan so I can build that kind of habit after Ramadan finishes. And then every single month goes by, you'll get better at your worship, and then especially in the next Ramadan, the cycle kind of repeats. Okay, what is something that you're missing that you want to implement into your life, and you know you can, but it's just a lack of there. It's just a lack,
And
and then you eventually can use that opportunity for that. Sorry, goes there.
and that's like, yeah, that's a really good thing to do. It's like, we go into Ramadan like so optimistic and like having like we're gonna build all these habits, and 100% like maintaining those after Ramadan throughout like the whole year is definitely like it's the best thing any of us can do, but it's a big challenge, like keeping up
Yes,
those habits,
obviously.
like especially like for example, if we look at the act of tahajjud itself, like maintaining that throughout the year it's difficult. It's not easy as well, like especially your iman, it's not something that's always like just stable. It fluctuates as well, and then as well as that specific time, you build the habit fairly quickly of waking up, but it's also like some days will be tougher than others, of course. And building sort of from there is like that's the most difficult thing, because in Ramadan where we have that spiritual boost and we're getting that recharge for the rest of the year, but once you're out, then it's like that's where like the real sort of trial in a way begins, because it's
Yeah.
like now you're really in there, so now you have to like be ready to like make sure that you have the tools and the like preparedness in order to take on making sure that you're like achieving those tasks and achieving those like goals that you made in Ramadan.
Okay, well, now the question I have for you is how can you make sure at not of course doing it every day is maintaining is very difficult, but what essentially could actually help you at least doing it for the most part?
To
So
be honest, it's
one
the
thing you could
community.
say it's the community. Yeah, I was gonna say it's the
It's
environment you're
the
in. Yeah.
biggest thing 100% it's the community, you know? And that's what I feel like a lot of us at, at university struggle with. And especially being in an environment where you'll find so many different types of communities and you'll like sort of be inclined to go one way or another way. And I know so many people who have chosen like their own path and sort of, oh, I want to be a part of this friend group or this friend group. But at the end of the day, it's the after Ramadan, the friend group that you're saying like keeping those habits up, the friend group is really what helps you stay in a position where you're geared towards like achieving those goals and making sure you keep up with those habits. And like other than that, of course there are a few other things, family life, home life, but it's the friend group and who you surround yourself with, especially at Guelph and the Musalla that we have. That is the biggest thing. At least to me.
Okay, I was gonna say something else, but Afan, you've been very patient here. I never asked you about how about what's something you did, but go ahead.
For me, just to piggyback off of what you guys were talking about, I think the biggest thing this entire Ramadan that I've tried to do is just build up small habits that I can continue on doing after Ramadan, right? And I feel like, especially during Ramadan, in the beginning, the first 10 days, is kind of like you're the optimistic, like you're very optimistic. You're trying to try new things, read as much Quran as you can, go to the masjid as much as possible, pray tahajjud like Zuhair said, and maybe stay for Tarawih the entire 20 instead of just staying for the 8, right? But I feel like the middle 10 days are kind of the hard part, right? Which is like having the
Agreed.
discipline to actually continue with those things that you've been trying to do for the first 10 days. Because like the last 10 days is obviously like Laylatul Qadr and you kind of want to like do as much as possible. So I feel like the middle 10 days are kind of those days where you build up those small habits, whether it's reading Quran, praying extra nafil or sunnah, or praying tahajjud. And I feel like those things are the crucial things after Ramadan that kind of benefit you moving forward after you complete Ramadan.
Kind of to really jump on a different topic, but like stick with the. So of course we're all talking about, oh, we're helping ourselves do more nawafil, do more of the voluntary acts. We're trying our best to. Zohair is trying to do greater tahajjud. Afan saying, you're saying people that normally would, let's say, pray 8 for a tarawih, but like stick for the whole 20, or unless your masjid prays for 8, just do at least the whole thing. One thing I think many people should really focus on, especially let's say us in university especially, is that when we are alone, or at least are private, like alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alone in our rooms, just like this, what essentially do we do, or how do we think, how do we approach these thoughts that we have? For example, it's kind of easy. Let's say you can go to the masjid, right? The whole community is, let's say, praying tarawih, so it's easy for you to pray tarawih. The whole community is. Okay, Omar has 2 screens.
Yo,
Yeah.
we got two of them.
The whole it's kind
Sorry,
of
my-
easy to
my
really
crutch.
stay. Okay, now
Yo,
someone else
yo,
is
we
go.
Yeah, we got Abdul Malik.
Wa alaikum assalam. Abdul Malik, you gonna show your camera?
Sorry?
You gonna show your camera?
Nah, I don't look good right now, bro.
Bro, show your camera, man. Everybody looks good. It's okay.
Everyone's on, man. You gotta come on too.
It's
Nah, yo,
Ramadan, bro.
people in
Everybody
last
has
episode were
movement.
saying, yo.
Yo,
All right, Abdul Malik, do you have any opening remarks? We put you on the spot now.
No, bro, I'm good. I'll pass.
Okay, wait. I kind of want to piggyback off of what you're saying, Haris, about like when we're alone, and how we are when we're sort of in a state where we're not surrounded by our community. This is where like I feel like a lot of us, even as individuals, like we lack sometimes. I myself as well, where like the the sheet's too heavy, man. Like I can't get out of my bed right now. Like it's like it's a solid 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm just like, it's okay. Like 10 more minutes, I'll get up. Like that sort of thing. And this is like I'm
Yeah.
speaking outside of Ramadan. In Ramadan, we have like our friends who are like, oh, by the way, make sure you're ready at this time. So we feel an obligation towards other people as well. That like we're gonna be awake at this time and going to this place to pray and like like gain good deeds and these sorts of things. But there's also the concept of getting rid of haram when we're alone as well. So because a lot of the acts that like we can do when we're alone, like it's very easy to do haram when you're alone, especially like whether it be in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan. Like we have to acknowledge the fact that sins they're also committed inside of Ramadan as well. And when it comes to being alone, that's when it gets even easier. And that's also a sort of thing we have to tackle as Muslims as well, to make sure that we're not sort of veering off the path when we're like on our ones and by ourselves.
Well, essentially, yes, it is a battle of our nafs. If we are always in this constant dilemma of like, okay, do we follow our nafs, or we may not think of, like, we may not be very mindful of sometimes, especially when you said, oh, let's say outside of Ramadan it's 3 a.m. in the morning and you don't want to wake up for tahajjud because it's not the Ramadan spirit, first of all, and also oh yeah, like, I'm so tired, just 5 more minutes, and like, 5 more minutes, and then the 5 minutes turns into you wake up like 7 a.m. You end up missing up Fajr, astaghfirullah. Like sometimes that happens, right? But it's just the overall thing is to really fight the nafs. That was the point I was trying to get to, was that Omar, was it you that sent it to the chat where it was it Ibn al-Qayyim that said the best of you are those who control their nafs at their alone time? I just forgot.
Yes,
I'm
I
paraphrasing
believe it
this whole
was.
thing.
Yeah,
I believe it was
it was that one. Then there was I forget specifically it was Umar bin Khattab or if it was another Sahabi, but essentially it goes like don't judge a person by how much Quran they recite or what actions they do from the apparent. Rather, you should, if it makes sense, judge them based on how they are with their nafs. So essentially speaking, like outwardly, I could go out and portray myself as a mufti or an alim, etc. But then at home, I could go and just do whatever madness I could. So essentially, there's two factors here. Number one is the niyyah of the person, and number two, secondly speaking, how well they are when they're in their privacy of their home, if that makes sense.
Interesting. No. I would say that makes a lot of sense, right? Especially since so many times like, you find yourself kind of or not, you find yourself, you kind of see other people where when you look like you see them at the masjid, you see them in the community. Alhamdulillah, they're doing great things for the people, right? But you can't necessarily always judge a book by its cover. There was actually a story I heard recently, or I've always known the story, but it kind of came back from a series I was listening. Are you guys familiar with the story of Barsisa?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Much
Exactly.
well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but everyone knows the story. But essentially,
Yeah,
there was a sister that needed someone to take care of her, and then two of her brothers, I believe, said, "Oh, Barsisa seems to be a very pious man. He can possibly help this sister because he's a very pious man. What can go wrong?" And then eventually, the wrong thing happened. I'm speeding up the story, obviously, but eventually the wrong thing happened. But here's the thing: if you were to actually look at the story, they didn't necessarily need Barsisa's help because it's not technically his responsibility for taking care of that sister. It wasn't technically his responsibility, but I kind of see how this kind of delves into Omar's point by you can't really judge a book by its cover, and especially all of us probably have not witnesses ourselves, but we know of many stories where this could possibly take place. If anything, what else? What other stories or what lessons have you guys learned throughout this first 10 days of Ramadan? Or not necessarily lessons, but just constant reminders where it should help every Muslim, or essentially, it's something that hit you personally and you want to take it forward.
Can I start? I guess.
Yeah. Anyone can go.
So I kind of wanted to continue the topic of like at night what you guys do in order to stay disciplined to wake up and whatnot. For me, I've actually tried doing this new strategy where I would give myself the 3, 2, 1 countdown, right? So essentially, when I wake up, if I'm really tired, and I don't want to do the things that I usually would want to do, which is either wake up for tahajjud or go to qiyam, right? For me personally, what I would do is I would give myself the 3, 2, 1 countdown, right? And it kind of trained my body to be like, okay, after that countdown ends, you have to get up, and there's no ifs or buts, right? And I feel like that's helped me a lot, especially this Ramadan, so I don't like lose the things that I try to do at night, especially, and even during the day, right? Sometimes you're, especially right before iftar, you're kind of lazy. You don't really want to do anything. You kind of just want to have iftar and just continue after iftar for tarawih, whatever it may be, right? So what I've always tried to do is give myself the countdown. Be like, okay, I'm gonna do this, whether it's read Quran, whether it's just listen to something Islamic, whatever it may be. Just try to do those things, just so I train myself that even after Ramadan finishes, I can still continue that those things as well. So yeah, for me personally, that's kind of been the best thing that I've tried to implement this Ramadan. But yeah, Alhamdulillah, that's that.
Honestly, I kind of like how you mentioned this. So, do any of you, does anyone here kind of, or did some form of introspection throughout the first 10 days?
In what sense? What do you mean?
In what sense, where you're kind of recording yourself? So you're kind of recording the deeds you're doing. You're kind of like journaling, basically. If I were to summarize it.
For me, it's kind of been just the like reciting Quran, right? Like, cause I've spoken with Zohair about this. So after every salah, I tried to read at least 12 pages, right? And that way, the calculations behind that is after every salah, if you read 12 pages, inshallah, you should be able to finish the Quran at least 3 times, right? And that's kind of what I've tried to do, because my mom, Alhamdulillah, she's always been able to finish the Quran multiple times during Ramadan. So I've kind of tried to like...
Allahumma barak.
Yeah, so I've always tried to kind of follow her in that sense. So I was trying to do a bit of research and be like, what's the best way, what's the best strategy in order to do this during Ramadan, right? So I came across a video, and the person was talking about how if you read 4 pages after every salah, you'd finish 1 Quran, and then it was I believe it was 8 pages, you'd finish 2, and then 12 was 3 times, right? I'm not sure if the calculations are exactly correct, but that's kind of the gist of it, right? And I feel like something like that is a really good way to keep yourself in check, right? Just to check and make sure that you are following a strategy, like Hars brought up.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll add something as well. Something me and Salman actually implemented. Salman is one of my friends from uni. But something me and him implemented basically was that we're starting to pray Salat in Fajr in Jama'ah at the masjid every day now. And essentially what this does is that not only does it make you, quote unquote, excited to actually wake up rather than tired, because you're meeting with your friend to go somewhere, essentially, but on top of that, it builds up the habit that you're not going to feel as lazy anymore, if that makes sense, because you're just going to wake up and you're just going to think to yourself, hey, I have to go pray now, etc. Let me just go to the masjid right quick, rather than just waking up and feeling tired the entire time and then, feeling lazy to get out of your bed and whatever it is, So it becomes like breathing, basically. You don't really notice it until you actually start thinking about it, right? So just stuff like that, just building up good habits in whatever way possible.
Building sort of off of everything what y'all have been saying now. So to me, it's actually been like my reflection and sort of even just thinking right now about how I've been like just proceeding and just sort of coasting through Ramadan and like not really realizing as Omar was saying, it just kind of becomes muscle memory in the first 10 days. What I've noticed is that like it's the focus itself, sort of the perception of that we have on Ramadan specifically. Like it's like you can choose to live or choose to spend your Ramadan like at Isna, and then also or there at the mosque, and then also in places like, for example, Ridgeway, or like in America, like places like Suhoor Fest, or like all these different, you have you you have the you have like the freedom of choice of how you want to go about spending it, you know? And and that's what I've sort of noticed is that even for myself, I've taken a shift from like last year where I was like, oh, like all these iftars, like all these different like, oh bro, like Ridgeway, like every night at like 1 a.m. That's what was popping like last year. That was the go-to, but this year it's been like a lot more of a change where it's like, oh, like even though those things exist, yeah, like we go here and there. There's so much more to it than like just that, and like really trying to spend most more of your time at the mosque rather than in some like food place. Because even with food, like it's like if you're eating too like obviously anything too much of anything is bad for you, but more geared towards like the balance of food and then also like the fast itself is like you're spending more of your time in ibadah already, you're fasting, and then there's the food aspect where if you eat too much you're gonna be tired. If you eat too little, like of course you're probably still gonna be tired, but it's about eating the right quantities at the right moments and spending your time in the right places in order to actually build that balance in Ramadan. And that's what sort of the biggest thing is in Ramadan. It's like balancing everything together. And if you can't have that balance, then you're not really ready to like face the world even outside of Ramadan. Because if you're building your foundation with fasting, with all these things, then outside of Ramadan, managing your time should be like a piece of cake. But
True.
it's that sort of goal again that we have to like attain and really forget about like the way that we lived before Ramadan and focus on living in a better way after Ramadan.
That kind of goes similar to the point I had when we were all talking about what we're doing different this Ramadan. Was that I did talk about, okay, yeah, what in this Ramadan, let's see if how I could build the foundation for how I want to live my everyday life, right? But I'll do on the topic. So last week we actually did kind of cover balancing school and Ramadan. Afan, you had a really good point about how everything kind of has its time. So you said that when you're in school, that's when you most likely would do your schoolwork, and then when you're at nighttime, that's when you do your voluntary worship acts. However, Zahir, you did mention food, or at least or the quantities, at least within the different times a day. You did mention you wanted to talk a little bit of what you personally are doing right now and how it has been helping you in terms of that milk, that water mix you're making. So I should just tell
Yeah,
people about this.
yeah, 100%. So, like, what I've sort of been trying to do is balance my own routine in Ramadan. And with, for example, doing physical activity and going to class and doing all these things and making sure that your mind is in the right place to even study. And me and Afan have also talked about this. I've just been like just sitting with him, been like, man, like I have so much brain fog to the point where I can't even focus while I'm fasting. Like, of course, it's tough for everyone. Some people have it better than others. Like hunger affects people less, and like some less, some more. So unfortunately, I'm some of the more. So what I've been trying to do is there's this sort of like little hack I found out where you like it's like you in warm water you can mix like some lemon and chia seeds as well, and then also Himalayan rock salt, so like pink rock salt. So pretty essentially what this is, it's a mix of electrolytes from the salts, and then as well as from the chia seeds. They're actually absorb a lot of water. So if you leave them in water, obviously the absorption and what happens is that when all of this stuff goes into your body, number one, the lemon's cleaning you out. So that's like one of the greatest benefits of it. And then number two is a really big thing as well, which is hydration. And throughout the day, we're going through our like routines and whatnot. And if we're going to the gym and if we're running, even like a lot of people, they're more into cardio and those sorts of activities. And even at the gym, like for myself, I'm more of a sprinter. I like to sprint and do these sorts of things. And when I'm on the track, obviously I'm thirsty and whatnot. Even today, I was sort of experiencing that same thing. But alhamdulillah, like this sort of hydration drink, you might call it. Of course, people drink electrolytes and these sorts of things too. But the more of the natural things that can sort of aid us in making sure that our fasts are not only like they're not only done, but they're done with ihsan, you know, like we come in prepared, and we make sure that we're still able to do everything we want to do, and we're not like, you know, waking up at like, you know, 3 p.m. and I'm just like, oh, roll out of bed, you know, pray dhuhr, and I'm just like, yeah, Ramadan, bro, I'm fasting, like that sort of thing. So, especially like with my school routine, like, you know, waking up for like if I'm going for a 9:30 class, then I'll be out of the door by 8:30, and like that's, I mean, Ramadan, it's not really fun doing all that, but that's like, it is what it is, and like making sure you know how to manage all that. That's like it's a big thing, and like again, it links all back to the balance and time management of like your
Isn't
food, especially. What's that?
isn't chia seeds a part of the sunnah or something? I could be wrong. I'm not.
I believe I didn't want to say it because I was like I wasn't 100% sure, but
What I do know is that, of course, we have the dates. We also have honey. Like, I think a couple of
Honey's a
teaspoons
really
of
good
honey.
one. Honey's a very
Honey's
good one.
yeah, honey is pretty good. I heard, yeah, and water and cucumbers as well. I know a lot of the health benefits from cucumbers.
yeah. So I don't think there's anything mentioned about that. But now that you mentioned cucumbers, there's actually a Sahih hadith. It's
Someone sent it in the group chat, I believe. I don't know if
Yes,
you
you know,
remember.
this was in the group chat as well.
Yeah. Let me try finding it.
it's Sunan Ibn Majah, I believe. Sunan Ibn Majah, 3222. Like I saw this today actually. So this was talking about how the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was seen.
So I said,
So not 3225. It's I may be mixing up the numbers, but he was seen eating like dates with cucumbers, and like that's like, if you think about it, that's like kind of a, like to us, to myself at least, I've never done that, so it's kind of like a crazy combo for me. But there's definitely some sort of wisdom behind it as well. So that's also definitely something that you should maybe look into and kind of find out if that would be beneficial, because of course if it's from the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then there has to be some sort of real life application to it as well.
and it's natural ingredients too, so it's not
Yeah.
gonna be, it's not gonna really
Yeah.
be processed.
So I actually found it. It's Sahih Muslim 2043. So yeah, it's so essentially the brother in the group chat, he said so the Abdullah
Cucumber.
ibn Jafar
Oh.
radiallahu an, he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam eating cucumber with fresh dates. So essentially, it's kind of reviving this sunnah of the Prophet. That's kind of what the brother posted in the group chat. So, if just for the clarification there.
You know how I like how you kind of mentioned Zohair, where it's just some people, they can work well with kind of being a bit hungry, or they don't need a large portions of food for food. So Abdul Malik here, I know for such a long time, he's been bulking like ever since I've known him. Ever since I've known him, he's been bulking. So yo, Abdul Malik, I kind of want to leave this to you.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you want to tell people like how you bulk during Ramadan?
Both in Ramadan. Brother, like I'm on a cut right now, bro. Right now, bro.
No way.
Ramadan is his cut, bro. All year round is the bulk, and then Ramadan's the cut.
No, but none of you guys have a bulk during Ramadan.
It's hard to bulk during Ramadan, man. That's
I
basically,
know that. But that's why I'm asking.
you're asking the guy to like eat as soon as iftar happens all the way till suhoor, man. That's how you bulk. Like,
Yeah, I don't see the benefit honestly in bulking. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of
Yep.
Ramadan. I feel like because the whole purpose is to focus on ibadah, and I feel like if you're trying to bulk during Ramadan, you're kind of defeating the whole spiritual and physical.
but we literally always just end up eating more.
Yeah, I know, right? But I think that's another thing too, right? To keep discipline on is like knowing how much to eat and how much you should eat during suhoor and iftar as well, right? A lot of people get carried away, especially with iftar, right? They eat way too much, and then by the time the suhoor comes, they don't even eat suhoor, right? And they just pray fajr and they just continue the day off. That's not how you should be doing it, right? You should follow the sunnah, and you should eat something small in suhoor, and you shouldn't overeat during iftar as well.
I feel like that's also more specific towards like different kinds of cultures as well. Like for desis as well, we have like samosas and pakoras and
We eat a lot of like fried and oily food.
yeah, aloo
Yeah.
pakora and
Stuffed
like
rolla.
spring rolls and all these things. And like I feel like that sort of stuff is where like we sort of falter a little bit because that will just like mess us up for like the
Yeah,
next.
I believe. Yeah, I believe that's where some people say they end up gaining weight in Ramadan.
That's yeah, it's the biggest
Yeah.
thing because not only and then there's also like fruit chart and everything, and obviously fruits are good for you 100%, but it's still like a sugar at the end of the day, and it can like obviously have like a contribution to your weight gain if you're not like maintaining like a balanced diet as well. So if you're just eating fruits and you're eating samosas, it's not gonna help you out like crazy, you know. So there's that sort of thing, and that sort of brings it into like maintaining a good protein intake during Ramadan. And how we do that is making sure, whether it be through protein shakes or eggs and these sorts of things that can sort of benefit you in making sure that you're like ready for the next day as well. Where it's like if you have too many carbs in your system, then it's not gonna go well. If you have too many fats, obviously not gonna go well. Fried things, best to avoid them. Like, but you know, I'll just I guess I'll try to take my own advice.
Honestly, I think if we're taking, go ahead, Afan. Go ahead.
I kind of wanted to ask Abdul Malik this question of like what you guys culturally would eat during iftar, because like obviously all four of us, the rest
World
of
is
us
brown.
are
We're all
just
desi,
kind of
like-
brown, right?
I was gonna ask Abdul
like
Malik.
we kind of have a very similar like lifestyle in terms of what we eat. So I kind of wanted to ask Abdul Malik like what specific things you guys do that might be differently than our Stacy's.
As in the food that we eat.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the-
yeah. For like iftar or suhoor, whatever it
Yeah.
may be. Yeah.
Honestly, like at least in my household growing up, again like we ate like a lot of like derivatives of rice and protein intake. For example, like rice and beef, rice and chicken, and all that. And like it's always a variation of that. And I personally feel that, especially like in my culture, we have like even though there is a protein intake, we have and more of an emphasis on the carbs, if that makes sense. And of course, like anyone would know that like if you have an excess of basically anything other than protein, then you're going to end up gaining weight. So other than that, then I don't have anything else.
Yo, actually, I'm gonna be like the bearer of bad news. Protein can also make you gain weight.
No, that's technically it's always has been.
At the same time, like,
What?
what I mean is that like the protein fills you up more. While like for example, let's take pasta or rice. It takes more for a more quantity to fill you up. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it also burns out
Mhm.
faster
Also
as
burns
well,
out
right?
faster,
So, yeah, exactly. And I feel like what happens is if you have too much of those carbs, you especially during suhoor time,
Exactly.
right? That will run out in a couple hours after you wake
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right? And me and Zohair were actually talking about this and what we should do during suhoor time, what we should eat, because what actually happened with us is in the morning we're just dead tired when we were getting up and then coming to university.
We'll be driving to
We're
Guelph and just
driving. We're just so tired out of our minds because we don't know, like, because we barely ate, and the main things that we did eat was all carbs, right? Just
Yeah.
to like basically eat as much as you could, right? So I think the best thing for everyone to do is to have the balance, and not to eat as much carbs during suhoor, and kind of save that for iftar, just because fasting during the entire day, having carbs only in your system or an excess of it, it's gonna run out, and you're gonna feel it, especially in the last 2-3 hours of fasting, because that's when it's all completely gone, it's burnt, right? And you kind of have to just rely on your own stamina, basically, right? And I feel like that's kind of the hardest part for a lot of people. Alhamdulillah, this year, it's the fasting has been a lot shorter than previous years, but even then, I don't know why, it still feels like some days you're just like, I'm just so tired, I don't know what to do. And I feel like we kind of have to come up with that balance, like Zohair and Haris were talking about. But yeah, inshallah, hopefully we can implement those things moving forward.
Although I think the general outcome, like Alfan, you said this before, we all need to come Ramadan with the right intention, dude. Dieting is kind of like this. Maybe not the
That's a
last thing to
far-
care about. It's probably something you should care about, especially if you want to, of course, take care of your body and take care of your diet. But of course, like the number one thing is ibadah, and then the diet you have isn't really the top priority. However, okay, on the topic of food, so I kind of want to go in towards this, not rabbit hole, but I want to talk more about the community iftars or like our family iftars. Have you guys been to a community iftar? You've just seen them waste so much food. Like, that
Yes.
annoys me so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been sort of a big thing in our communities, especially like at
The thing
least
is, sorry to
the
cut you off, but like the thing is, we there in the West we don't have it as bad as because I've seen like how Saudi prepares their iftars. Like, yo, that is that like they have a whole feast for literally the whole. I don't know if you guys seen those like the Prince fast.
I
Have you guys seen
personally
this?
have not. I haven't.
I think so. Like, are you talking about like the general like sort of hotel like feast that they make,
Yes.
right? Yeah, no,
Yes.
100%. Like I was in 2017 I went to like Umrah for like the last 10 days of Ramadan. So
Oh,
Alhamdulillah, like yeah, it was amazing, man. Like we were in Medina and we'd go to the mosque for like Maghrib and stuff, right? So they'd set up like the big like sheets, like rolls of like plastic so that we could eat on it and whatnot. So they gave us like yogurt and like a couple of like pieces of bread and then like this like sort of it's like garam masala. Like I don't know, it's like this sort of masala packet sort of thing you can like put in your yogurt, like those sorts of things, as well as teas and these kinds of things. So the thing is, I mean, there was so much barakah in that like specific iftar that like we'd go back to the hotel and like that was like we would look at all this huge feast and we'd just be like, no, I'm good. Like I was fine with that. Like I just take me back there. Like, and then like it'd be like all this huge feast sort of thing, and we'd just be looking at it and we're like, yeah, bro, I'm full. Like just get me some coffee. I'm going to bed. Like that was the sort of what happened, and then like I don't know if you guys have any sort of stories of what you've seen in terms of food waste specifically, like here, but I've definitely seen a lot of like community iftars in comparison to family, of course, where like you're sort of your own table on a smaller scale. Yeah.
No, what was the point you were gonna say before I cut you off? Sorry.
My point?
Yeah, you were talking. Like,
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that like no, I feel like I've been kind of taking the floor a little too much here. But
you have the most to say.
yeah, I mean, like, I'm here to make the best of it. But
Okay, fine. I'm addressing the elephant in the room. He knows who he is. Omar Asif right here, that Mr. Dawah director. Have you had any like ashhadu during Ramadan?
Any ashhadu? No, nothing yet, man. Inshallah, though, we make dua, but again, the whole purpose of dawah is not just shahada, etc. It's like it's merely just to put a seed in the person's heart, right? Like the best analogy I could give you is imagine somebody is on a ship, right? And they don't know where to go, so you give them a compass. Now, the compass obviously it points north, south, east, west, etc. Right? And after that point, after you give them the compass, it's up to them which direction you want them to go. Preferably, you want them to go true north, which is Islam, right? But regardless of that, you cannot force the person which direction to go. Your only job here is just to give them that compass, so they have that tool in the first place, right? But inshallah, maybe some ashhadu. We'll make dua for that.
Inshallah. Even if it's not in Ramadan, after Ramadan, we'll see.
Yeah, inshallah. I mean, shahada is shahada, right? So any time would be the best time.
Okay, kind of going back to our original topic of food waste. So I know I've been to quite a few community iftars, and honestly, like, sometimes I've seen sometimes they'll bring just boxes, so that's just easy to distribute with the people. Like, instead of catering, they'll just bring boxes. But even then, sometimes I would go to the masjid. I'll finish my food, right? So I just go to the garbage can, like trying to throw my garbage out, and I kid you not, I see whole trays of food just in there. And I'm thinking, yo, who actually, like, in the month of Ramadan, like, this isn't appropriate, man. I'm not trying to be a sheikh. This isn't appropriate. This is shit. I'm not being Sheikh Hassan Hakim here, but honestly, if you would have a similar reaction to me if you saw what I saw, and maybe you guys have seen what I've seen.
I kind of wanted to speak on this because I actually went to my masjid for an iftar yesterday. So I was there, and Alhamdulillah, they actually implement this thing where any food that you don't end up finishing, you just take home, right? And I feel like that's what a lot of people should do, right?
Yeah,
Especially
no, I
if it's
agree.
packaged food, right? You can just take it home, eat it whenever later, maybe for suhoor, whatever it may be. But I think it's important that, especially with the food wasting, what I've realized is a lot of people, they take too much on their plate, more than they can eat, and they kind of try to finish it because they fasted for so many hours, so they're just trying to like eat as much as possible, right when iftar finishes. But your body kind of doesn't need that much. It kind of just needs the maintenance level,
Especially
where,
since you're fasting.
especially since you're fasting, exactly, right? Where you don't need that much food, and I feel like that's where a lot of the wasting goes. So I think what people should do, like I said previously, is just take the food home, right? Especially if you're at community iftars, take it home, eat it maybe for suhoor or for the next iftar, whatever it may be. I feel like we need to really focus on following the sunnah of the Prophet and
Sallallahu
not
alaihi
over sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not overeat or do anything in excess, especially in Ramadan, right? The main thing we should be focusing on is ibadah and getting our connection with Allah, right, much better. And this food narrative of like just eating as much as possible during suhoor, during iftar, should not be our main focus.
That's a really valid point. Yeah, everything kind of interconnects there. One thing I would say, unfortunately, is just that we have this. Unfortunately, now, honestly, I would say also in the West too, we have this overconsumption mentality. We get too much, more than what we actually need. So people get more food than what they actually need. People take more food, and even if they take it home, sometimes maybe they finish it, maybe they don't. But that's also sometimes it's a big if. And when we're in this topic of overconsumption, sometimes we really have to think that, honestly, when we look back, even the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, even many years after, we can talk about the Islamic Golden Age. Of course, the food industry was completely different then, but there are many hadith where even when Muslims are kind of like at their power, they still didn't have a lot to eat, and a lot of it was due to the fact that there was also a good community distribution. For those who couldn't afford food, were able to get food from those who could. Or people who couldn't eat food, they were able to distribute. Or people that didn't eat the food that they got, they were able to give it to those who are less fortunate. And I don't really see that here in the West, at least. We have this like overconsumption mentality that the more we get, the more we think we feel better for ourselves, but the product itself kind of is at waste. Do you guys see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I personally feel like we're just privileged, honestly speaking.
No, that's a fact.
That I think that's the biggest thing. Unfortunately, we have so much access in terms of food and resources that we just take everything for granted, unfortunately. And if you look in the other third world countries, unfortunately, they don't have enough food to even last them like during iftar and suhoor, right? And you always hear these stories of people speaking about how they don't have food for suhoor, and they're asking people around like, how are we supposed to fast with having nothing in our stomach during suhoor or iftar, whatever it may be. And it's so sad to see that. And then the flip is us in the Western society having so much food that unfortunately we end up wasting it completely. And it's just sad that the balance of power, I guess, in the world is so different, especially during Ramadan when it comes to food. And I feel like we need to kind of stop ourselves and teach ourselves that we have to help other people, especially in the month of Ramadan, and we should devote our energy in making sure that other people that are homeless, whether it's in Canada or overseas, and make sure that they're fed more than we are, because we're always so privileged throughout the year to eat whenever we want to eat, whether it's at school, whether our mom makes food for us at home, or just we have the privilege of just buying food whenever we want, right? So I feel like it's important that, especially this Ramadan, we kind of go through the charitable aspect of making sure people eat food that aren't fortunate, and just making sure that we kind of use this month to benefit other people, right? More so ourselves, because when you benefit other people, you're also going to be benefiting yourself, because you're going to
Yep.
get the reward of helping them out as well. So I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, there's even the hadith. Is it hadith? I believe so. I could be wrong. Where it's if you give from charity, you're not losing anything. Or I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, if anything,
You're
you're
getting
gaining
chased, you're
thing, right?
You're gaining.
yeah,
You're gaining the barakah of Allah Subhanahu wa
the
Taala.
barakah, exactly.
But on your point of where we see third world countries not getting as much food, may Allah Subhanahu wa Taala give them sustenance. But even in Canada, like I know a lot of communities in like northern Ontario. Some of them are all honestly in that same boat. When we talk about maybe like First Nations, I'm not trying to get too political here. However, we do see these practices in Canada, and I think one thing every Muslim should really focus on is sustainable practices, especially not even just when it comes to food, maybe even when it comes to what they buy, like clothes, glasses, this laptop, anything. And the one story really comes to my mind, and what comes to my mind, I may be forgetting some sort of details, but forgive me for that. It's my shortcomings, but I forgot there was this one scholar. He's from a small village, and he's from the farmland, so they grow the crops, they grows everything. He wants to study Islam, so he goes to the big city. He goes to the big city for his school. And then when he's in that big city, he goes to the local marketplace and he asks the marketer, he's like, "Oh, where did you get this fruit? Where did you get this fruit? Where did it come from? How did you grow it? Where was it grown? Where did it?" Marketer didn't really tell me anything. He said, "Hey, if you just want this fruit, just take it. And just take it and pay it." And then the scholar just said, "You know what? I'm not buying it." And what he ended up doing was every single food he ended up getting, he would go back home to his village, just stack up on what he thought he would thought he would eat, and then go to the big city, and he would only eat just from his own village, just because he knew where the food was touched. He knew how it was grown, where it was coming from, and how it was essentially made, and it was a good sustainable practice for him. I'm not necessarily saying we have to follow on that point. We have to follow with a scholar, but we do have to make sure that when we're buying things, or even if we have, let's say, food that we don't necessarily need, the best thing for us to do, give it away, give it to people who essentially need it, and let's ourselves focus on sustainable practices. So we kind of did touch upon a lot. We kind of went through a lot. Omar, I believe right before, like last week, you wanted to talk about a certain topic. However, what I really want you to really discuss is, can you recall any sort of anything from the Quran, or anything from the Hadith, or anything from the Seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where Muslims should actually how Muslims should necessarily treat Ramadan, or how they should fast on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question.
Anyone can come into if you heard a hadith or anything. I'm just
One thing that comes to mind, and it's not necessarily from like the Seerah or the Quran. This is just some, I guess, just teachings from some scholars, right? But since we were talking about overconsumption and all of these practices beforehand, a lot of people, they have the mindset that Ramadan is just abstaining from food and drink. So when people come into Ramadan, all they talk about is, "Oh, I'm so hungry today," or "Oh, I'm so thirsty," etc. Then when iftar comes, they eat their food, boom, pow, khalas, and then they're fine for the next day, right? But then on top of that, like, Ramadan is not just abstaining from physical sustenance, right? It's abstaining from your desires and your own nafs at the same time, right? So, like, to your question, how should we treat Ramadan? Essentially, if we're going by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's way and the way of the scholars, etc., you should be having a focus on everything, not just two things, food and drink. Your foundation should be included everything, if that makes sense, So you should essentially try to create a balance with yourself where you're not just starving yourself, you're trying to improve yourself at the same time, right? And that's a lot of people, they have that misconception that Ramadan is just there so you starve yourself and so you feel like the poor people or whatever it is. No, that's not the case at all. Yes, of course, like you starve yourself throughout the day, you abstain from food and drink, but on top of that, you're trying to better yourself as a man and as a woman, etc. You know, and the way you do this is by practicing in more ibadah and stuff like that, right? And that's the whole month of Ramadan revolves around it. It's the month of the Quran as well. You know, if you're lacking on ibadah, start with the Quran. You know, this entire month was sent so you could focus on the Quran. Start with the Quran, read some more Quran, etc. You know, and just do whatever you can in order to better yourself in that perspective.
Have you guys felt that, I don't know, the more you read the Quran, the more you feel that the time that there's barakah in it? Or you just feel
Yeah.
that you have more time? I don't know if you have you guys felt that?
Yeah, I've realized that, especially as I previously talked about how I would read it after every salah, right? I would try to read as much Quran as I can after every salah. I've realized that you kind of get so like invested into it as you're reading it, you lose track of time like everywhere else. Like you're so focused on making sure that you're reading Quran, understanding it, and just trying to finish whatever amount that you're trying to finish for that time period. You just kind of lose track of time, and it's actually really good. It's a good thing that I realized, alhamdulillah, this year, in comparison to previous years, where I've tried to kind of have translations as well while I'm reading. Whether after I finish reading, I kind of try to get a summary of what I've read, or it's more so as I'm reading, I kind of have the translation beside me, right, where I can just refer to it if there's something that's popping out to me, right? But for me personally, in terms of reading Quran, I feel like it's a very good way to invest yourself for Allah, right? It's the word of Allah. It's the revelation. As Omar said, it's the month of the Quran. So you should try and focus as much in understanding the Quran, in reading the Quran, in learning about the Quran, and just try to build your entire life around the Quran, right? Because at the end of the day, it is haqq. It is what you should be focusing your entire lifestyle on. And I feel like a lot of people, they kind of lose that sense in Ramadan, especially. They kind of try to focus on Taraweeh, which is obviously good, you're still listening to the Quran, but actually sitting down and reading the Quran, it's a completely different experience. And I feel like a lot of people lose that aspect in Ramadan.
You know, actually, like just the Taraweeh I was at, you know how maybe if you know a couple words of the Quran, you can just when they're reciting in Taraweeh and you just hear that word, like, oh, I know what that means, right? Are you just thinking that? So you know what's funny? They're reciting Surah Yusuf, and I know the whole story, and it was kind of fun, like that Taraweeh, like that 2 rak'ahs. It was, of course, every like rak'ah is technically fun, but it was kind of fun in this one because I kind of understood like what was going on. I was like, oh yeah, first he's talking about the sun, moon starts prostrating, then it goes around the story of how his brothers like turned on him. Then it's him in the well. It was a bit fun. He kind of felt he followed through the imam just reciting the Arabic, and that's essentially what the Sahaba really took it as well. Like when they would be standing in Taraweeh, or I could be wrong actually, when they'd be standing in Taraweeh, it would just be a lecture from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala when they're just listening to the reciter, or maybe that's how we should also approach for it as well. Of course, not all of us here know Arabic and know the every single word, but I think one thing we honestly really, I feel like it's a bit underrated in this community, or not necessarily, it is not talked about as much. We need to learn Arabic, or at least like the classical Fusha. That way we can actually understand the Quran through the meanings. Then we'll be able to interpret it, and when we're able to interpret it, we can have a much better relationship with the Quran, and it would be easy to memorize as well. One thing I've actually have been doing, and this is actually completely different. Like, I haven't. When a lot of people talk about, oh, it's Ramadan, it's the month of the Quran. Yes, it's the month of the Quran. However, here's the thing: people just take the time to read it, and of course it's great to read it. Alhamdulillah. Afan, you said your mother finishes quite often. Alhamdulillah for her. You try to follow that same example. I'm pretty sure everyone, Abdul Malik, Omar, Zahir, you guys all have great examples for that. One thing I actually have been doing is actually reading tafsir. Reading the tafsir of the Quran, specifically Al-Maldudi. That's because that was one given to me. But I was reading Al-Maldudi's tafsir, and each and every single sector that he kind of goes upon, it's so like mind opening that when you just read the tafsir, you're not only like trying to understand the Quran, you understand the bits and parts of the seerah as well, knowing why it was recited, why it was sent, what was the reason why it was sent, what specifically was the wisdom behind it. So that, I think, maybe one thing we really should focus, especially honestly, now that we have 10 days in Ramadan, next 20 days, try to read as much tafsir as we can as possible along with the Quran. So
Just to sort of interrupt you in terms of the learning part of Arabic itself. I feel like a lot of people don't really know about like the sources themselves where we can go to like actually get that sort of Arabic knowledge. There's good sources out there. Like I just want to list a few here just in case any of the listeners want to really like, yeah, we got number one right. But there's specific programs that are more catered towards people who are from outside of the culture or like the Arab culture itself that haven't lived in that specific like geographic area. So there's like the Noman Ali Khan programs, like the Dream Intensive programs. There are he has a couple of other Arabic programs as well that they're like located. Some of them are located on YouTube. Some of them are actually on his Bayina, like the Bayina TV website itself. There are others as well, but sort of this is more like what's widely available. There's other specific ones that like you can of course like find out for yourself, but those are the sort of ones that I've been able to see and sort of just like kind of take a look at.
That's good. That's great insight from Zohair. Well, the one Afan Abdelmalik, we touched upon it last episode, consulting with local scholars. Maybe if your local masjid does not have an Arabic program, maybe there should be maybe a start to that. But honestly, I think also consulting with your local scholar, maybe finding resources from that would also work as well. Just to add on.
That's actually point. Funny enough you say that's actually where I got this.
Yeah, exactly. He got that book from that.
Yeah. I actually wanted to speak on like the translation, Haris, that you were talking about, and Zohair. They actually do this at Isna, where during Tarawih, after the first four, a sheikh comes. Zohair knows this very well, and he kind of gives a summary of what the first four rak'ah were actually talking about, right? And it's like a 10-15 minute lecture where basically he gives a summary of what the entire 4 rak'ahs were about. And I feel like a lot of masajids, they should start doing that. And obviously doing it after every 4 is going to be a lot, right? It's going to take the entire night essentially, right, to finish the 20 rak'ah. But I feel like just even after the 4, like what Isna does, I feel like it's really good to keep you engaged, especially it gives you a break, right, from praying and just listening to what the sheikh is talking about, and just trying to like connect yourself with the Quran while you're in Tarawih, like Haris was talking about with Surah Yusuf, and how all of us I'm sure know about the story, and just hearing the ayahs being recited in Tarawih, you kind of get the connection. And I feel like it's very important for us as Muslims to understand the Quran more so just reading it, because a lot of us aren't obviously Arab speakers, and it's important that we kind of understand what we're reading, right? Imagine reading a book in English and having no idea what it's talking about, right? It's kind of
reading a book in a different language in general.
Exactly, in a different language. Yeah, exactly, right? And having no idea what's even being said, right? It doesn't make any sense. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people and a lot of times we kind of forget that, and we kind of just be like, okay, it's the Quran, it's in Arabic, we're just gonna read it, and khalas, that's all it's gonna be, right? But especially this Ramadan, we gotta kind of understand the translation. Maybe not obviously go too into depth because obviously we don't have time, and it's only just 30 days, and inshallah after the 30 days you continue on. But even this during just Ramadan specifically, try to take some ayahs that are intriguing towards you and maybe connect with you, right, on a daily basis or a personal level, and try to like incorporate those specific ayahs into your life.
Well said. Abdul Malik, I'm really sorry to do this, but
Yeah.
you should be thanking Allah every single day that you were possibly born to understand Arabic.
The thing is, I was gonna speak on this too. Thing is, Alhamdulillah, I could speak Arabic fluently. I could read, write, and speak it. But at the same time,
Allahumma
when
barik.
I'm reading Quran, again, there's a lot of differences between Fusha Arabic, like classical Arabic, and modern
Yeah.
Arabic. Because again, there's like how much, like 24, 25 dialects in the Arab world. That's not including the sub dialects in every Arab country. So whenever I'm reading it, I would say that I understand the majority of it, Alhamdulillah. But there are some I would say 20 to 30% that I don't really get, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
I
it
would
just
say
it sounds different.
It's
It
kind of
sounds
like
different, so-
Shakespearean. It's
Yeah.
kind of like Shakespearean English,
Yeah.
where
Mhm.
like you're reading it and like okay, you kind of get an idea
Yeah.
of what they're talking about, but there's some parts of it where like what is going on, like
Yeah.
what are they?
Well,
even
that's where
talking
the
about?
importance of a teacher, or importance of someone to
100%.
monitor really helps. That oh wait, this actually means this in modern Arabic, or this means that, or if this means this in Egyptian. You might have that
Yeah.
actually.
So I would say like even for the Arab speakers out there, like just gain as much knowledge as you can, because no one knows 100% of the no one will ever know 100% of the Arab language, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
No one
Yeah.
will be able to master it. So again, the knowledge of Islam is just infinite. Like you're supposed to be learning every single day. It doesn't matter if you're Arab speaking or not.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. I guess I'll continue on since we're taking a break with this. Just to connect with what Abdul Malik said, I feel like what we should do, like Haris was talking about, is we should all try find someone that is, if we could, a local imam, right? That obviously knows Arabic and understands the Quran, and just try and like sit with them if you can, whether it's online or in person, preferably in person, because I feel like the experience is different, right? Just being there, but just trying to like understand it while the imam is there, and sitting with him and kind of just like reading through the Quran. That's the reason why I'm saying this is because I did this before with Surah Al Imran. I went in the summer with my mom a couple years back to Al Huda, and I kind of during the summer they had every Saturday they would go over Surah Al Imran, right? And they would have this entire tafsir and the translation. I have a different mushaf where you could actually write underneath in English, and essentially I would write the translation as I'm listening to the tafsir, or as we're doing our classes, and I'd basically write down what each word means. And as I'm reading through the Quran, and it's actually funny, in my mushaf right now, as I was reading through the Quran, there's like obviously like I have writing in for Surah Al Imran. So as I'm reciting it, I always try to follow the actual English as well, just so I kind of understand what I'm actually reading. And I think it's important, whether you do it online or in person, to actually take the time out of your day to do that, whether it's for 30 minutes, an hour, or even 10 minutes, right? Just to do that, especially with the last couple surahs, because obviously they're a lot smaller, so they won't take as much time in order to, understand them. So I feel like we should all do that, inshallah. Maybe we start it this Ramadan and continue it after Ramadan, or there's many ways of doing these things, but personally for me, I've always found the best way to do it is to do it in person with someone that is Arabic speaking.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just to add a bit to your point there, because we're talking about understanding the Quran, understanding the Arabic language as a whole. Basically, there was actually an incident. So a man came to it was either Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal or it was Shaykh al-Islam bin Taymiyyah. So a man came up to him and said, I want you to teach me, basically. So I want you to teach me about Islam. I want you to, teach me scholarly knowledge, etc. So the man asked him, do you understand the Quran? He says, no, I don't. He said, okay, go understand the Quran and come back to me first. So essentially, the whole point of this incident is that it shows you the level of priority that needs to be put into understanding the Quran and then moving on to other issues afterwards, because a lot of people will become like a quote unquote alim or like an ustad or whatever it is, and they'll have hundreds upon hundreds of books about hadith and all this stuff, etc. But you ask them to translate the Quran for you, or to, even translate the shortest ayat in the Quran for you, they don't know it. And it's a problem because the Quran is kalam Allah. How can you talk about Islam? How can you spread Islam when you don't even understand what your Lord was saying in the first place? So this is, and unfortunately, this is a big issue that, especially like, a lot of people have nowadays, specifically like, like the Pakistani and the Indian people, etc. Like we're taught how to read the Quran and how to like, pronounce the words, etc. Like the Zabur and like the Pesh and all those stuff. You know what I'm saying? But we never take the time to understand what those words actually mean. Like if I ask you guys to translate Inna A'tainaka al-Kawthar fasalli rabbika wanhar inna sha'niyaka wal abtar. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know the translation of that myself, and it's the shortest ayat in the Quran, or shortest surah in the Quran. And it's sad, wallahi. So this is something that, like Afan was saying, we have to prioritize this, and we have to, inshallah, if not this Ramadan, then at least start it as soon as possible.
No, while we're on the topic of Arabic, when we listen to the Sirah, when we listen to at least stories of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Quran was sent down, the people, they were able to speak Arabic. They spoke the language technically on the Quran, but they could tell that the Arabic that Rasulullah ﷺ was reciting and speaking, they could tell this was out of this world. Unfortunately, some chose to believe, some chose to not believe. I don't know. The point I'm trying to get out of here is that if this was possibly the most like perfected way to tell the Arabic language, Abdul, you can probably agree with me on that, right? If this was the most perfected way to preserve the Arabic language and make it as the Kalam of Allah, then what's stopping us? Like what really is stopping us? If we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe in the messenger, they tell us to do, if they have told us to, let's say, pray 5 times a day, give zakah, or even just read the Quran or try to understand the Quran, then we must submit to it. We must submit and follow that because we believe Allah is the Lord and then Rasulullah is the messenger.
And I want to just add to that point right quick as well. And that's pretty much what's, quite disheartening about our people nowadays, because at least with the Sahaba, the revelation came in bits and pieces, right? So they didn't have every piece of the revelation at once like we do right now. But regardless of that, they still took the time out of the day to understand the Quran, to understand what Allah was saying to them. With us, we have so many resources. Like, imagine if the Sahaba had Quran.com, and they had all these different reciters that you could play on.
I'll be not gonna lie, they might not need it. They would know automatically.
No, of course, but regardless, so you understand my point that if they had the amount of resources that we did, they would take advantage of it to such a
that is true
insane degree. Where if you look at us, how we're quote unquote taking advantage of it, it's quite sad, to be honest with you. We have access to all different books of tafsir in the world, all different recitations, all of these things right at the fingertip of our phone. But we'd rather go on TikTok and just go on YouTube and do all this stuff, And wallahi, that's what's sad about us, and we ask Allah to, grant us hidayah in that regard.
I mean, honestly, it's just kind of. I'll let you talk later, but kind of building on that point, I think instead of just let's not talk about the Sahaba in general. I think it's kind of our responsibility to be the best believer we can possibly be, because the best believer, I believe, will take advantage of these opportunities Omar is talking about. We have so many resources available to us. It's kind of up to us to really find it, and it's up to us to really be that true sense of believer. Afan, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was, I feel like the reason why we kind of lack in this regard is just our culture, especially in the Desi culture. We kind of get forced to read the Quran, understand how to read it, and then go straight into memorizing, right? We don't even get the privilege of trying to understand what the Quran is talking about. Like, obviously we have lectures here and there and just like small talks that the imam would give at the masjid and whatnot, but like actually sitting down and understanding what the Quran is saying, like word for word, I feel like we completely skip that entire step and we just go straight into memorizing. And unfortunately what I've seen is a lot of kids or teens that end up memorizing the Quran, they end up forgetting it because they don't even understand what is being said, right? And their whole thing of memorizing it is just so they memorize it because either their parents told them or maybe they were interested, Allahu Alam. But regardless, they skip the whole step of actually understanding it. And when they finish memorizing and they're reciting it to people, a lot of times I've witnessed this myself at masajids. They come up to them and they're like, okay, what does this mean? Right? They just randomly come up to them and ask them, what does this part of the Quran mean? And they have no idea, and they're just like kind of stuck in this loop of trying to figure out what that person's asking them, and them not knowing kind of has a bad light on them. And I feel like that's kind of something that we should all focus on, especially people that are not Arabic speaking, into actually sitting down, understanding it, and then inshallah after you do that step, then I feel like the memorizing part of it would also be easier because you actually know what you're reciting, right? And for me personally, that's kind of what I've realized with learning about Surah Yusuf, Surah Al Imran. It's a lot easier to understand and memorize those surahs because you actually know what you're reciting.
And that kind of leads back into like our sort of Islam in our adolescence and how we grew up with Islam and what kind of ways we were taught Islam in, and that is very structured around, was it love for Allah or was it fear for Allah? What was it really instilled into our hearts and minds about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what kind of what this sort of entity above us in like all control and our benefactor, or like he like has power over us all, what this sort of like construct that was being built in our minds of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was, what the Quran was, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, all of these things. And that is where it links to where we taught Islam with love and care, where we taught Islam with more in a harsher manner and in a more forceful manner. And those sort of things are what I feel like puts us apart from our generation right now, where our parents they're immigrants and they're from different places around the world, and the generation that was us to the next. Like, I know people whose parents came over from like Pakistan or Egypt or wherever it may be, and their kids, they had a sort of like, the immigrant's child had a different form of Islam that was implemented or given to him, versus what these kids are now giving to their own children is a very, again, different version of Islam that from what I've seen, has been built more on love and care for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, and a more sort of love of Islam that it's been built around. And that is sort of what we should be going for, like, no, regardless of what kind of like sort of upbringing we had with Islam, because that's the only way to ensure that someone is upon the right path. Because if you really think about it, later on in life, if you were taught Islam by force, your parents are going to be around you forever. By the time you turn 18, you're in uni, you're on residence, wherever you are, you're not in that environment anymore where you're going to be constantly be given reminders about, oh, did you pray, did you do this, did you read Quran, did you, like, are you fast, all these sorts of, even when it goes to like not committing sins as well, like all of these things link back into what kind of Islam were you given as a child. And that's one of the main things that we need to make sure that we're focused on, is how are our adolescent youth or our young youth given Islam from a young age. And that is from the onset of birth, actually, where it begins. So that's one of the biggest concepts as well, regarding how we want our future generations to proceed with Islam itself.
I think
Powerful.
I think
Powerful.
there's so touching on like how we implement Islam into the other generation, etc. I feel like there's two extremes to this specifically. So one extreme being you only put the love of Allah, and the other extreme being you only put the hate of Allah or like the anger of Allah into the child, etc. Now, at least from a Pakistani perspective, maybe you guys have a different view on this, but at least for me, I was mainly just taught, oh, fear Allah, fear Allah, fear Allah. Where's the love part? You understand?
Namaz
Or
nahi paroge to ye hoga. Like you get told that like if you don't
no,
pray,
no,
this
no,
is gonna happen to you. Like
literally, Jahannam mein jaoge and all this stuff, you know. But
yeah,
but regardless, so there's two things that we need to realize. So, Inna Allah ghafurur rahim, walakin adhab Allah shadid. So Allah is the most gracious, most merciful, but at the same time, his adhab, his punishment is the most severe, right? So we should implement a path that is structured down the middle, if that makes sense. And the best example of that is Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you know, and that's why it's so heavily encouraged to the people to actually learn the way of Rasulullah and not to try to teach Islam to your kids or whatever it is by your own knowledge, you know, because what is your knowledge compared to your own local imam? You know, it's nothing. It's a fraction of literally a grain of rice, right? So it's we should always have a balance in these two things, and it's very easy to fall on either side of the coin in this case, you know. But
that's literally
again,
like linked back to the ayah of our forefathers in Islam, and
no,
like
literally, yeah.
following, like and following. Oh, like the ayah regarding the idols and the people who were like involved in paganism and like oh like we were only following the religion of our forefathers and whatnot, and
You know what's
that would
crazy
have
though? That with that ayat as well, that can be applied to Muslims nowadays too, which is
exactly that's
Yeah,
what I'm.
so sad.
that's what we're
Like
going
like
for.
you go and again, this isn't something that just happens in Pakistan. This is happening in the Arab countries as well. You know, you go to people, you ask them, yo, why do you pray your salat? Oh, I prayed because my dad told me to pray it and I was taught to pray the salat. Okay, do you know why you pray four? Do you know why you pray two at this time? Do you know why this, why that? No, you don't know anything. You're only praying because your parents told you to pray. You know, what kind of, you're essentially blindly following something at that point. What kind of, as a man, how can you have self-respect for yourself, but then blindly follow something at the same time? It makes no sense, right? And that's why we're told as well, actually, to question everything in our faith. You know, because we know Islam is perfect and we know it's preserved and we know everything about it. There's no impurities within Islam. That's why we're told to question it, so we can see the perfection within it. You understand?
Honestly, if we were to take a step back, just let's step back, right? Of course, we're mentioning okay, our forefathers did this. Okay, maybe we should of course understand the religion as much as we can. But I think if we were to take a step back and say, what really is the issue resolving this? And of course, there's a lot of them. However, maybe one thing we should tackle upon is number one, there's a lot of mix with culture and religion. Afan, you touched on this earlier, but there's a lot of mix with culture and religion. At some point, unfortunately, like, religion has been something more culturally rather than something to actually be followed. It's not something that people would push in there, or at least maybe you could say the people that immigrated here, the people that, or their parents. It was something that was pushed just because, oh, it's our culture. We follow it because our culture makes it as is. However, we just need to think, okay, let's take a step back. Is this necessarily a cultural thing, or is it an actual thing really need to be guided by? And I think it's every single, or let's say every single Muslim country has their own, okay, no, this is our cultural practice, this is our religious practice. However, if we were to really, I think, and this really applies to anyone, if we're talking about the West at least, we need to see how technically our madrasas or our schools are actually teaching these kids. Are they teaching these kids? Again, we can say for the love of Allah or the fear of Allah. However, if we just see, okay, how are we teaching these kids? Are we teaching
Regarding
these
school,
kids? No, but I really think the schools, because for example, I grew up, right? My parents put me in Sunday school, the Islamic Sunday school, thinking that was gonna be good enough for me, right?
yeah, and I
And
was
then
put
and
into
after
I was
that,
put into Olive Grove like from like grade 4 onwards. And
here's the thing.
here's the misconception about Islamic schools, man. Like it's that parents put their kids into Islamic school expecting they're gonna come out some like next righteous human being
Yeah,
that's like
yeah.
next to an angel, like perfect and amazing. But they don't
Salman will tell you all
realize
about that.
and
No, I think there's a lot of stories that we can
they
go
don't
into.
parents don't realize that Islamic school isn't built to build a foundation in your kid. It's meant to
Yeah.
strengthen the foundation that's already there. And if you don't build the foundation from the home, then what foundation do you expect to be built when they're at the
That's
school?
facts.
They're gonna be there corrupting other kids who have weak foundations. Like that's the big thing, and that's what I noticed when I was at Olive Grove. When there were so many kids, like to be honest, again,
Yo, if anyone from Olive Grove listening, okay, maybe take notes.
no. This is my disclaimer. I was not the perfect child either. I've had my fair share of activities, but um, regarding Olive Grove itself, like I noticed grade 4 was fine, grade 5 was fine, grade 6 was like new kids started coming in and like that sort of thing, and if like that sort of started the sort of um first movement of like sort of like non-Islamic concepts coming into the school and like more like public school behavior, if you guys know what I mean, like public school like activity, these kinds of things being more involved in our environment. And that's where I was like, wait, there's issues with this, like what's going on? And that's when like I came to the realization that, bro, it's parents who don't understand that Islamic school isn't built for like to make their kid better. Like we're not bro, I'm not gonna send my kids to Islamic school to be like, oh yeah, Islamic school's gonna make them better. They're still gonna find a way to do what they want to do. Like they're gonna figure out, be like, oh, like even though I'm at Islamic school, after Islamic school I can just go and like chill at like whatever Sobeys Plaza and like like some next place.
Okay. I think this is a topic for a different video. But the
Yeah.
overall point. Okay, Zohair, like thanks for that insight.
No, go.
What's
Sorry.
the
it's-
Sobeys
The
Plaza,
overall
by the
point
way?
I
What
was
is it?
kind of make. Sorry. What?
What is the Sobeys Plaza? I'm not aware of
Yeah.
that.
Well, okay, fine. But we'll touch on that later on. Let's relax here. Okay. Let's relax here. I don't even know what he's talking about either, and I'm curious too. But this is a different time, different place. I think. Okay, so let's again going from a step back, right? Like Afan was kind of saying too on this. A lot of people like did memorize, or they were put into these Islamic institutions and everything. Their parents expecting them to possibly memorize the Quran, learn about Islam and everything and whatnot. The thing is, after a certain while, let's say a kid went through Hifz, right, and he memorized the Quran at the age of 10. After that, the parents never pushed Islam in the kid. The parents just said, "Oh, Alhamdulillah, my kid's a Hafiz. Oh, wow, I have something to do, say it to the people." But what happens after? The kid is not necessarily being told, "Okay, learn the Quran, or at least try to like be a protector, be an actual like the word Hafiz actually means be the preserver, be the protector of the Quran, be one of those people. Learn upon the Quran, act upon it, interpret it." So this, I think, if we're talking about, let's say at the Islamic schools itself, but then we also need to look at, okay, how can you actually maintain? Of course, it isn't easy, and we're not even parents too, so we can't even give like a first point of view. Although what we can do, we are university kids, right? We are kind of a role models to some high schoolers. I know that because I do like a lot of community work for high schoolers, and sometimes like they even ask me like, "Oh, you're a legend, you're a biggest man." Like, I don't know why they glaze me, but that's just how it is. No, I'm not. Okay, whatever. I'm just saying in the sense that we kind of also have to be those role models in the sense where we have to make sure these kids know that Islam is something that we follow, and it's something that makes us a good human being. It's something that pushes us through our life, and we become successful because of it. We are not successful like despite of it, and
I
that
think
again
that's
is a
where the-
whole
I
new
think-
topic.
I think that's where the love of Allah comes from.
Exactly.
Having the love of Allah versus the fear of Allah. And I feel like a lot of times us growing up, I feel like we were taught the fear of Allah and not much of the love for Allah. And I feel like us growing up now, we've kind of understood the love of Allah more so than the fear, because we've grown up with that our entire lives.
Well, let's say Alhamdulillah that
Alhamdulillah.
we figured it out at a good
Yeah.
time.
I
Okay, so
I
we are
think-
nearing.
yeah.
Or sorry, Afan, you
we'll
can make
speak
some
about the-
final remarks.
I was just gonna say that I feel like us as people that are born into Islam, I feel like it's actually it's harder for us to actually find true Islam, rather than actually like a revert, for example, that went through all
Yeah,
the
shout out
things
to the
and-
reverts, man.
yeah, I know, alhamdulillah. but them going through all the trials and tribulations, and then finding Islam, right? I feel like for us being born into Islam, I feel like it gets harder for us to actually find true Islam, because we're so fixated by our parents to learn about Islam through this specific lens, and as we're growing up, we kind of learn about it more.
And the influence of Western society along with
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
And okay, sorry. The last final thing that I sort of saw in Dr. Khalid Latif's lecture at ISNA last night, he had a little youth talk, was he sort of said something, and ISNA had it posted on their story, so I'm just going to read it like based off of that. But he said true submission means allowing yourself to not be in a place where you are burdened by rhetoric from external sources, external spaces, that are purposeful in making you internalize loathing, but on your own terms, you embrace capacity for change, and you don't have to have a default that says I'm a bad person, but a default that understands myself in this prism, a spiritual refinement that does not have any page in the must-have that says perfectionism is what we're supposed to pursue as Muslims. So, I know there's a lot to unpack there, but essentially just really defining Islam for ourselves without any external factors. That quote continues on, but that's sort of what I wanted to pick out from there is making sure that we have our own definition of Islam. And again, all those things link back, fear of Allah, love of Allah, how we're raised, our own mental, like what sort of mental state we're in, and sort of linking all of that together ties this sort of big web of what Islam it really is to us as individuals. But again, that's just a whole different conversation that we'll like maybe have to touch on next week.
Maybe here's a preview out here. But yeah, now that we're nearing the end of the episodes, I would like to say Jazakallah khair, guys. Thank you for being on this show episode today. And we did quite discuss a lot. It was, Alhamdulillah, it was great. We hopefully should have touched some people, or have made sure people have understood the benefits of throughout Ramadan and what we have essentially talked about, whether that's diet, learning Quran, and even just being a Muslim in the West. But if there's any closing remarks any of you guys have to say, take it away. Omar, Abdul Malik, Afan, anyone?
Nothing really. Just one thing I want to just emphasize. Because we're talking about defining Islam for ourselves, and all these intricate ideas. I feel like because we are the next generation, I feel like we need to create an environment for the upcoming generation to actually want to define Islam for themselves. Like for example, like if you see a kid running in the masjid and then an uncle comes and then kicks him out of the masjid for running in the masjid, what do you think that kid's gonna feel? He's never gonna want to come to the masjid ever again. An environment has to be created where they actually they don't feel like coming to the masjid because it's an obligation. They feel like coming to it because it's an obligation, and on top of that, because they enjoy coming to it. You should never, like with your deen, you should never feel that, oh, it's just a burden on my shoulder. I'm just gonna pray today so I can just get it out of the way and stuff like that. You should enjoy this stuff. So, as the future generation, we should create an environment like that, and inshallah khair. We ask Allah to help us with that. And yeah, inshallah.
Any closing remarks for anyone else?
I gotta
Okay,
go to
Jazakallah
school in the
khair.
morning.
It's probably
Yeah.
a different location,
Yeah, Sobeys is the spot, man. But alhamdulillah, like we definitely covered a lot, and to be honest, the only thing I'd say is that let's just really pray that in these next 20 days, especially, like we gain more and more from Ramadan. Like whatever is to come is for the best, and more lessons we learn, and inshallah, at the end of Ramadan, we come out as better people and better individuals who will, of course, keep on with those goals that we have for the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. Alright, Jazakallah khair for anyone listening. Now, if anyone's from Guelph, make sure we'll shout you out. You're just here right here, and make sure to comment below, or even I will send a voice recording platform for you to really check upon, and you'd be able to send a voice message to, and we'll be able to listen whatever topic you want us to really cover. That we are just five guys who are trying to get the most out of Ramadan, and like Zohair said, inshallah, for the next 20 days of Ramadan, we become stronger and stronger in our iman, and we essentially build habits that will be life lasting. And Jazak Khair again with Zohair, Omar, Abdelmak, and Alfan for being on today's episode. I'm the All Facts Podcast, and I'm out.